Bella. Welcome to Bella Uncinetto. I'm Christina, and I'm so glad that you're here with me today. If you're new, welcome in. If you're returning, welcome back. No matter how long you've been here, I always appreciate your time. It is long overdue, but we are back for another Fiber Facts with you. This is actually a podcast that I have put together, uh, different from the videos that are on my channel regularly. I made this into a podcast because it was supposed to come out semi regularly, and then life got away with me. However, I am talking about the history of fiber arts. And I started out with, let me move these out of the way. I started out with some timelines. So these are the timelines that I'm following. So I have this one here, right? A brief history of fiber arts. And then I have this one, which is multiple pages, but it's inside here. So I'm using these two timelines, and if you go back to the very first episode that I did where I was talking about the series in and of itself, I did link the timelines, so they're there for reference. Now, things are updating and changing all the time. Since I've made the first couple of videos, there's been even more information that's come out about the history of fiber arts. So I do not pretend that this is a one-stop shop, right? But I wanted to give some information on the various different kinds of fiber arts that there are, as well as the depth and breadth of fiber arts, because I just crochet, right? I don't weave, I don't spin, I don't knit, I don't tat, I don't any of those things. I don't cross stitch, I don't embroider. Uh, I'm not, those aren't things that I do, but those are all things that encompass fiber arts, right? I can sew, sort of. Like I can hand sew if I need to sew on a button or sew up a seam or something, but I don't have a machine to sew. Well, let me not lie. I do have a sewing machine, but I have opened it once. Um, I thought I was going to use it more, and I don't, but that's okay. Um, I want to do this research. It's something that I enjoy, it's something that I'm interested in, and I hope that you guys are coming along for the ride. If you're new to this series, please do go back and check out all of the other episodes. And feel free to put a comment or two, give it a thumbs up. The more thumbs and comments that a video gets, the more the algorithm pushes it out into YouTube land, right? So it's great that you watch it. I'm super excited that you are, but please remember to give that thumbs up. And even if you just leave an emoji as a comment, right? That is helpful. That helps show how popular it is, which in order to keep doing this, people need to be watching, because if nobody's watching, there's no point. So anyway, today we are going to talk about the history of weaving. Some of the information that I'm going to share will have been shared in other videos, because there are some tools and things that are used in weaving that are also used in other fiber arts. So weaving is acknowledged as one of the oldest surviving crafts in the world. It goes all the way back to very, very ancient times, and lots of things can be considered weaving. So you can weave things like baskets, making interlocking things with branches for like fences and protection. All of those things are considered weaving. So if you are doing those things, you're going all the way back to even, say, the Neolithic times, right? And as I'm talking, there will be pictures that pop up on the screen, because I will have edited the video to have things pop up about whatever I'm talking about. So when you are weaving, you have two sets of threads, right? You have a vertical set and you have a horizontal set. The vertical set is known as the warp, and then the horizontal set is known as the weft. So it almost creates like a crosshatch, or like because you kind of go like this. I can't do, my fingers aren't that long, but you kind of make this weaving pattern situation, right? Like this, if that makes sense. And you are um, going in and through to make a specific pattern. So much like you would make a mosaic in um, crochet or knit, where it's following a certain pattern to make a certain design, and that's what you're doing in weaving. Like, so you have all of your vertical threads, and then how you move the horizontal threads determines the design that shows up on the fabric that you make, right? So I have two articles here that I'm flipping through with my notes to make sure that I'm giving you all of the information. So originally, of course, as everything is, weaving was done by hand. Now later on we'll get into the machines, but they had regular wooden machines for a long time, and weaving can be found in all kinds of cultures all over the world. In America, one of the first evidences of weaving is with the Native Americans. So you have, especially the Navajo people, a lot of Native Americans used leather for their clothing and other protection items, but the Navajo uh, did a lot of woven fabrics, and they still use the same process today that they did when they first started weaving. So I think that's very beautiful that those teachings still live on. We were fortunate enough last year to meet some Native Americans on base, and they had some beautiful examples of things that had been woven from their grandmother, great grandmother, and great great grandmother, which I thought were stunning. So, uh, when you get into the Stone Age, that's when you're finding the first woven fabrics, because you have them knotted and laced together to make things, again, like baskets, nets, and all those kinds of things, so that you can have things that are useful. We're not yet into the things that are decorative. So, finger weaving was used at that point. They didn't really have a lot of tools, but finger weaving and stuff like that is still used even today. So then we get into the 11th century, where you are getting into these specialized decorative kinds of cloths, right? Um, but you have, in ancient times, going all the way from ancient Egypt, and they were the ones to use linen fibers, which I've done a video on. The Indians and Peruvians used cotton fibers, which I've done a video on. And Mesopotamia used wool. I didn't do a video on Mesopotamia, but I did do one on wool fabric. And then the Chinese were the first to produce silk fabrics, uh, and all of these would be woven. So in all of these cultures, you have a variety of fabrics, right, materials, but they're all weaving them. And I think that is fascinating, that even though at this time in all of these ancient societies there was no communication between them to the degree that we have now, for sure, but even before the age of technology and even mail, right? You had all of these different societies creating these various things to create fabrics, and they all were some version of a loom. Uh, so you get um, these variety of patterns, and you can see how important weaving is to many of these cultures when you look at their stories, when you look at their history, when you look at their mythologies, even. So in Egypt, there was, and I may say this wrong, so please forgive me. There was a goddess. Her name was Neith or Neith, and there's actually what is said to be a shuttle on her head. So it is interesting that they would recognize that as a shuttle. But she was the goddess. She was a weaver goddess and the symbol of eternal feminine nature. Then you get into Greek and Roman mythologies, where you again have Arachne and Athena and the whole spinning competition and weaving, right? And Athena being jealous of Arachne's work and her talent. And then you also have Homer's Odyssey, where Ulysses, or Odysseus, depending on which version you're reading, uh, his wife Penelope weaves all the time to isolate herself from the suitors that keep chasing her because they keep saying that her husband is gone and she needs to marry again, and all of those things. So then the Germans, they have Freya and Frigg, and again, I might say this wrong, Hulda. Some of the images that I saw spelled it Holle, but then some of them spelled it Hulda. So maybe one of them is a traditional, like, German writing and the way that they would spell it, and then maybe the Hulda is a later one. I don't know. Um, so one of the biggest problems that weavers faced was how to keep things taut, right? So how to keep them stretched so that the fabric didn't lose the design and the threads didn't fall apart. One of the methods that started in Latin America, excuse me, and is still used today, is the idea of a weaving tree. So you wrap the strings around the tree, and you can use it that way. And so by wrapping it around the tree, it keeps those strings tight or taut, or however you want to say it. And then you can put your design in there so that you don't have to have an assistant necessarily to help you with creating what you're trying to make. Um, then in the 16th century BC, we have a vertical loom that appears in Egypt. And the weaver would sit in front and work, um, started at the bottom part of the frame and moved up. And you had these weights that would hold down the work again so that you could do it almost without assistance. Um, and this created a lot of ability to make even more decorative fabrics and designs. So that was very lovely to see. So then we get into the horizontal frames showing up in the eastern and far eastern parts of the world. And you could use weights as well, but they were not adjustable. Um, the biggest change from the early looms to some of the more modern looms was the idea of the beam. Um, and these were rollers that were placed at the front and rear of the frame. Um, so that you could help the fabric flow better. Before the beam, you did not have the ability to roll the fabric um, unless you did it by hand. So then in Europe in the 13th century, we have the handmade loom, and this came with heddles, which would raise and lower the warp threads. So remember, the warp threads are the vertical threads, by using pedals or levers to facilitate the weft going through, um, again, making it even more complex in design. So then we hit the Industrial Revolution. And in the Industrial Revolution, there were so many things that came out. And in this time, you also get the flying shuttle, which we've also seen shuttles in tatting. But this shuttle was holding this bobbin of thread to allow you to weave more quickly. So it would hold the thread inside of there, and you could almost like you were spinning it out, but you were taking it and weaving that through, and the thread would spin off and be used that way. And this was developed by John Kay in England. Then you have the what's the best way to say this? You have we're already in the industrial era, so you have the first mechanical loom. That's a good word. Produced. Edmund Cartwright in 1786 patented the first mechanically driven chassis, and this was put on a loom. However, it was difficult to make things the way that you needed them to be, because sometimes it would become too tight, and then things would snap and break, or you couldn't do it well enough, or would not be as elaborate, right? As you're figuring all these things out, and as always happens when you're figuring out new technologies, you're getting all of these like learning curves, right? So something is developed, and then you learn how to use that, and then something else is added to it, or a new way is developed, and then you're trying to figure that out. And you see that in all sorts of machines and all sorts of avenues for jobs. Things change and adapt over time, and sometimes they're successful and sometimes they're not. So then we come to the solution for this loom problem, with a Frenchman named J.M. Jacquard, and this was in 1804. He built a weaving machine that could be applied to the loom, and so this allowed the automatic movement of the single warp threads, but he used this perforated card. So it kind of reminds me of the music that would be done on the little tin, and you would use it, and it would play, right? As it rolled around, it would play the music. But this was on a card so that you could put in the thread, right? Um, Now, this loom was extremely um, inventive and interesting. However, it was actually not very popular. There were even some even some cities in France who ordered the looms to be destroyed because weavers were afraid that they were going to lose their jobs over this. Um, but by 1812, right, he developed this in 1804. But by 1812, there was already 11,000 jacquard looms in operation in France. A decade later, it had spread to England, Italy, Germany, America, and even in China. So, in the span of 20 ish years, the jacquard loom went international, right? It became a very, very big deal. Um, and you can do a lot of these things commercially now, like factories create these things, but there are still some amazing things that are designed on hand looms. I have a former colleague of mine who actually she just left, and she would shear her own sheep and spin her own wool and weave her own cloths, and it was beautiful to see her work. There is a channel, Spring the Fiber Enthusiast. She has done some weaving videos, and she's shown you what it looks like. Now, looms tend to be incredibly large, so I definitely don't have the space for one, and I definitely don't have the inclination to learn at this point in my life. That could change. I feel like my chair is too low. Hold on, guys. It is. I'm sitting all the way down here. um, when I have world enough in time and I'm retired and all of those things, which we'll see how that comes to pass. But it is definitely something that I would be interested in seeing in my travels. I know when I went to Erice, on the other side of Sicily, on the western side of the island, there were stores that had big looms, and I did put some pictures. I could put that video in the description box. But there were some amazing, amazing designs that they would make. And they have a very specific cloth that they weave in their shops. And it's a designation of that area. Much like the Navajo people, right, that I talked about at the beginning of the video. And much like many of the other civilizations that did the weaving, there were specific designs and specific things that were unique to their area. And so in Erice, they have a very specific fabric that they will weave for rugs, for shirts, for all kinds of different things to be used. So when you go out, you know where the cloth came from, right? It's a very specific pattern. So I hope that you have enjoyed this episode of Fiber Facts with you. And as always, be well, be safe, and be the change you wish to see in the world, everyone.